I joined a 48-hour like short film race. I completed it. I hadn't made a short film in 5+ years, but I really wanted to try it out. Anyways, that's a whole thing. It's for like a film festival down here in South Texas. And after a lot of time of work, it was already really late. And I just told myself, you know what? I deserve a little reward, little reward. What does that mean to me? It means usually time to watch a movie, time to watch a little TV show. Because it was already late, I'm like, let me see what. Oh, Lanterns came out. Let me check it out. I haven't really seen a trailer. I think a long time ago I did, like months ago. But honestly, I've forgotten anything about it. The only thing I remember is I believe there's this movie called Rebel Ridge, if that's where he's from. The actor who plays, I think his last name is Pierre. The actor who plays Jonathan Stewart in Lanterns. I remember watching Rebel Ridge on Netflix, and I was like, I'm like a casting director or something. I'm like, he's got to be Jonathan Stewart. He looks exactly like Jonathan Stewart, and he's got to play him, right? And then a little bit after Rebel Ridge came out on Netflix, they announced that he's going to be Jonathan Stewart, and I told my whole family. I was like, you see, I was right. Anyways, my introduction to Green Lantern is Jonathan Stewart. I mean, I grew up watching the 2000s, animated series, whether it was Marvel or DC. DC always had the stronger ones, Young Justice, Justice League Unlimited. My Green Lantern's Jonathan Stewart. I think he always was portrayed in the cartoon, responsible, brave, good leader, right? And also always going back to his community and giving back to it. And it's perfect casting, right? Like this guy who plays him is composed. It's subtle acting that he's delivering and more toned down. But I say that because opposite of him is Kyle Chandler, who's this huge actor who's been in Friday Night Lights, who's done so many movies, and he's playing Hal Jordan. I don't know anything about Hal. Every now and then I've seen a DC animated film, and he's come out in it. He always came off as cocky, a little bit rash, but at the end of the day, he still did the right thing. This series, man, I'm telling you, this is what James Gunn needed. Because, honestly, ever since he's taken over, I don't think there's been something that's been a great hit or something that critics and audiences can be like, that's something great. Something that will pull us back in and just add hope to the fire. Hope, right? Because honestly, right now, it just looks like he's on thin ice. Superman wasn't a huge success. It wasn't a great film. Supergirl was a big flop. Peacemaker Season 2, from what I heard, ended terribly. Like the last episode was really, really poor. And overall didn't do great numbers-wise. And now we have Lanterns. This is a show that's being made by HBO Max. And he needed this. He really did. And us as audiences, I mean, it's a treat. It's a great pilot episode, from the very beginning, man. Spoilers coming up in this video, man. If you just came in to hear whether or not it's a good first episode to try out, you should try it out. Just know that this is a very grown-up show, and this is TVMA show, right? It's being produced by HBO Max. Foul language, adult content, things like this, right? Let's dive into it. In the episode you meet John Stewart. And I was so happy to see him because I've been waiting for them to make like a live action version of him, right? I just really loved the cartoon Justice League Unlimited and Justice League animated series Green Lantern. So you open up with him and he's like in La La Land watching this TV, and the TV is Hal Jordan giving an interview when he was first sort of when he first did a public like heroic act. I assume before that he was trying to be low key, that he was the Green Lantern of Earth. He stopped a meteorite. I'm pretty sure there was people there. He gets interviewed for the first time, and Jonathan Stewart, little kid, very just focused, right? Calm but focused. And then his dad comes in and he tells Jonathan, go outside, right? Jonathan is this little kid, keep in mind. Puts an apple on Jonathan's head, points his gun at him, razor focus, gun pointed at a kid, right? What's a kid's reaction? You would think he'd be crying. No. This guy is cool. He's got zero fear. And if you know anything about Green Lanterns, if you know anything about the Lanterns, that's a big deal, right? You could have no fear. You have to be fearless, brave. And it's clear from the get-go, it's clear as a kid, that's what Jonathan is. Boom! His dad shoots, Apple gets destroyed, and like nothing. Jonathan just walks over to him, gives him a big hug. And you could see that there's been like previous shots that he's been shooting and practicing, and I think it's sort of like a little test to see how scared Jonathan will get, but he just doesn't get scared, right? And then they say they're gonna have like some McDonald's or some food later, right? Look, that's a cool scene, right? But the scene is in a suburban home, less than 1 acre of space, and there's houses everywhere. This is like a neighborhood. I can imagine the neighbors being like, honey, our neighbor's shooting at his kid again, or something like that. And then we do a time jump. And what you get is polar opposites, it seems. You have Hal Jordan, who's been doing it for years as Green Lantern. Years. And you could tell it's worn on him. He doesn't wear this suit, right? You could tell he doesn't really have respect for the Guardians. Either he doesn't have respect or he doesn't trust them. And maybe he doesn't have respect because he doesn't trust them because they broke his trust, right? And here you have someone who's rash, someone who's seemingly just doing his own thing. He's supposed to be training Jonathan Stewart, but it just seems like he just kind of like forgets about him, or he just forces him to do stuff on his own, right? Like in the episode, Jonathan has to chase someone. He looks at Hal, and Hal's like, I don't know, I'm not going to do anything. And you're a little bit frustrated as the audience, but Jonathan just chases him on foot, and he catches a bad guy. And it's things like this, right? And he's crazy. Like, Hal is crazy. He really is crazy. But what I will say is he hasn't put Jonathan in a position where there isn't a way out. Even in the beginning, where he picks Jonathan up in the car, they're driving. Out of nowhere, Hal takes off his ring, puts it on the front, on the dash, and he's like, see ya. Boom! Jumps out of the car, and Jonathan is left on the passenger seat. And the thing is, he didn't just jump out of the car like on a normal road. No, he was going like 60 miles per hour, and this guy was about to get off of the cliff. This is like rural town, Nebraska, which I'll get to that later. And Jonathan immediately puts on the ring. Boom! We don't see, but we're told that he made sure he had bubble wrap all over himself. Car's destroyed. Jonathan survives. Right? Long story short, it's interesting. Jonathan here, he comes from a military family. He's told, he's known, respect your elders, I imagine, is what he was told as a kid. But also just respect the chain of command. It's what he does. He tells Hal, I respect the chain of command. Hal kind of looks at him like, okay. It's interesting because going into this, I thought I was going to get like a lantern that, is always suiting up. Next mission, next episode. Suiting up, next mission, next episode. And in the meantime, maybe you have like Jonathan Stewart being trained or something like that. But no, this is a season-long arc. A mystery. Like there's a plot interweaving, that has a lot to do with aliens and murders and whether or not certain dangers are there, right? We don't have all the answers. The audience doesn't have all the answers. We are more so on the perspective of Jonathan Stewart, right? So he knows, Hal knows more than he's telling him, right? But he's, just being basically like they called them space cops. This is a space cop buddy TV show, right? but it's gritty. It feels grounded, you know, even though they could do stuff. They could have chosen to go anywhere in space, but they chose a story to be in a town in Nebraska. That's not to say you don't see like them using the Green Lantern powers and everything. You do, right? But I'm starting to pay attention. Like the heroes in the show are a lot of it is the writing and the acting, right? When you have those two paired up, along with a directing that knows what the story has to be about, and you know, directors that aren't egotistical or anything. If you have writing and acting down, I think there's a high probability you'll be making something great. And that's what this show is, on top of everything else. You know, the cinematography, the on-set location shooting, you just tell they are there, right? I didn't even have to look it up. You could just tell they are there. And going back to the story, you know, Hal really thinks there's some sort of threat coming from these aliens, right? And it has a lot to do with how he first got the ring. You know, he wasn't trained. It wasn't something that was built up. The ring called to him after some alien crash landed, right? And basically told Hal, you know, this is now yours. The ring chose you. The alien dies, and now Hal is the Green Lantern of Earth. And overall, I'm hooked. The best scene in the show so far in the first episode is that interrogation scene. You know, nobody's believing Hal, but Hal is like, that's an alien. Like, I could just tell. Like, I just know it's an alien. They're like, no, it's not. And he's like, just give me 5 minutes and I'll show you. Right? Great scene. The interrogation scene. He's across this guy that was there in a recent shooting there in Nebraska. He was arrested, right? He's a man that Jonathan Stewart chased. And it's an interrogation room. Jonathan Stewart and the sheriff are on the other side of the mirror, and Hal is interrogating the alien. The way that he questions him, you can just tell he's very experienced, right? You know, he tells him things like, oh, like, what's your favorite football team? And all of these questions about football, the alien knew all the answers, right? Maybe with a little bit of thinking, but he knew. And then out of nowhere, Hal asks him, what school did Harry Potter go to? And the alien's like, I don't know, I've never read it. And Hal is like, oh, well, what, you never read the books? Like, what about all the other movies? Like, how do you not know what school Harry Potter goes to? The alien's like, I don't know, like, I don't know. And then he asks him a bunch of other questions. What about Barack Obama? Like, any thoughts on Barack Obama? And the alien says just one fact about Barack Obama, and that's it. And Hal's like, so that's it? Like, that's your thinking of Barack Obama ends there at a very superficial fact. That's all you have to say. And the alien's like, you got me. He's like, basically tells Hal, you know. It's a great scene because Hal throughout all of this is just pressuring and pressuring and pressuring and pressuring. And the alien says, you know, I'm here for a specific purpose. A very dire purpose. He says his purpose, one of the purposes is vengeance, right? We don't know for what, we don't know for why. And he tells how, you know, because of how important my role is and my purpose and the secrecy behind it, you really think I'm gonna let you get that out of me? Hell no. And he tells him, I could activate with a thought, basically a self-destruct bomb. And he tells Hal, I bet you couldn't even protect everyone in here. I bet you couldn't even protect yourself. And Hal's like, why is that? And he's like, because you haven't even charged your ring. The ring that the Green Lanterns use has to be charged, right? There's this big lantern, you have to use it. And Hal tells him, I have enough power, don't worry about that. And the alien basically tells him, we'll see. Mind you, this alien is, I don't think I've said, this alien is in shape of a human, right? So it's, this whole time is a human actor, of course. And then the bomb gets activated and the sheriff starts running, but Jonathan is like, there's nothing you can do. Like, there's nothing you can do. If that bomb is going to blow like half the town to smithereens, right? We can't get away from here. How? What he does is he immediately just puts a bubble around this man and BAM! He did protect everyone, right? And so, yeah, it's just a big mystery. And then the way the episode ended, you know, it just jumps forward in time. I believe around 8 to 10 years, I believe. You could tell Jonathan Stewart is a lot older. He's got this beard that he had, this mustache and beard that he had in the TV series, the animated TV series. And he's very familiar with the sheriff. Seems the sheriff was familiar with Hal. Eventually, like, I imagine we'll get there to where the sheriff, maybe she falls in love with Hal, right? And he asks her who else knows, and she's like, just a groundskeeper. And I'm wondering, like, what? No, what? Like, what? Show me. And we go, and Hal is dead in the bleachers. Hal Jordan, our second protagonist of the show, is dead in the bleachers. Right. This is, of course, in the time jump that we see. And then that's it. That's the he doesn't have the ring in his hand, and that's how the episode ends. You know, he's got a bullet hole in his head, and you're like, what the hell? And the episode ends there. And there's a bunch of other things, you know, other people playing their part. I assume they're gonna play bigger roles. People in the background, there are talks of a corporation, and I'm thinking, what could that be? I don't know. I will say this though. I think, you know, how he is a hero, right? But you could tell he's very worn. He's very I honestly think at some point he kind of was like Jonathan Stewart, you know, follow your commander, follow the orders, follow this, do that, do what you're told. And my thinking is they either asked him to do something that he wasn't okay with, or they forced something happened where like that trust was broken, right? I think how right now, this is what I'm thinking, right? Like I just watched the first episode. I think Hal knows Jonathan wants to do the right thing. I think he can recognize that as a hero, right? I think he knows that. I think he also knows that Jon Stewart is someone who might blindly just follow orders and just follow and trust his command. And I think even though, yes, Hal is rash and his training techniques are very unorthodox and put Jon in danger, I think he's overplaying it, how much of that he is, just to kind of show Jon, like, just because someone is above you doesn't mean they have your best interest, doesn't mean they're gonna do the right thing, or doesn't mean that you should trust them entirely. I think that's what's happening. I honestly think Hal is just overplaying that part of himself because he wants Jonathan to know, or to at least question, like, his leadership in the future, right? And to not just blindly follow it. That's what I think. I don't know. I don't know if it's even gonna play out later, but just thematically from a writing perspective, I think that's what we're getting at. And of course, like, the chemistry between these two is great. You know, they banter, and Jon Stewart is annoyed by him, and Hal is like low key getting up to something. There is a mystery, and it has to be solved. And even though he's keeping his cards, you know, close to his chest, he brings Jon along, you know, as his trainee. Overall, great start. I appreciated the grounded, small, you know, location that they decided to go with. I think it's great. It just really allows for the writing, the dialogue to really shine, you know, the acting performances to really shine, and to have personal moments between these characters, and to just create a great show. You know, not anything that's going to blow the budget out of the water. Yes, you still see them use the rings, but something Hal said, you know, you could tell he feels responsible for how he uses a ring and when he uses it, right? Like, even when Jon looks at him, he kind of looked at him, like, are you going to help me get this guy? Hal just kind of wins. Mm-mm. He goes like that. And initially, as an audience member, you're like, dang, this guy's a jerk. And maybe Hal's a bit of a jerk. But then you think back to what he said, like, you have to be responsible with when and how you use the ring. All the times that he's used it so far have been either mildly playfully or strategically, like with the dollar bill, right? Or obviously to protect others. But I think it's that thing where it's like, because the ring has very limited, it has a limit to its power. It's not Superman. You can't just keep going and going and going. He just trusted. He knew that John was gonna catch that guy. Maybe. That's what I think. I also thought it was interesting what the sheriff said about how, before I end, I have to say Kyle Chandler is doing a great job. Everyone's doing a great job, but Kyle Chandler is a standout so far. He's doing a great job as Hal Jordan. Something that I thought was interesting was the sheriff is talking to Jon Stewart, and she asks him, why do you respect him? And John said, I guess because he's brave. And she said, Hal's not brave. He's just never let anyone in. He's never loved anyone, right? Other than his parents, but his dad died when he was a little kid in the fighter test pilot crash. She tells him, he's never loved anyone. How, insinuating, how can he be scared if he's never loved anyone? And then she says, he's just lonely, right? It's character depth, man. Like, those things are just character depth. I appreciate those little things. It doesn't feel forced. It feels very subtle. And I'm excited. I'm going to continue watching. Again, HBO just continues coming out with some great content. And DC, I think ever since James Gunn took over, is this the best stuff we've gotten from DC? I think so. If you ask me what's the best thing that's come out of James Gunn, season 1, episode 1, Lanterns episode. That's my answer. Easily. Right? So yeah, guys, check out the show if you're a superhero fan. I recommend it. It feels very gritty. It's my type of show, man. This is my type of show. Like, grounded. And the plus is that it has superheroes in it. Yeah, so check it out. Let me know what you guys think about Lanterns and any predictions that you guys have. Please let me know. Also, I think the season is about 9 episodes long, if I have that correct. So, yeah, 8 more to go. Catch you guys next time. God bless. Bye-bye.